The failures of Derek Falvey and Thad Levine's front office on today's episode of Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Minnesota Twins podcast. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, and I'm your gracious host, Nash Walker. Thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. I'm Nash Walker, writer at Twins Daily, lifelong Twins fan, bringing you 5 days a week, now 3 days a week coverage during the lockout on the Minnesota Twins. And today we are back to talk about the failures of this front office since they came in before the 2017 season. Monday, we talked about the successes. There are plenty of failures as well, and we're going to pull those away and kind of build this equation and come to an answer later in today's episode of, does it come out positively? Does it come out negatively? Some of that will go into Friday as well when we talk about leash for this front office, although there might be a different perception of leash for us as there is for ownership and what they think of Derek Falvey and Thad Levine's job thus far. But we're going to look at failures today. We break everything down on this podcast. We really do. We've broken down so many free agents, so many trade targets. We've broken down the front office. We've broken down. Next week, we'll break down Rocco Baldelli. It's all coming on Locked On Twins. Subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Twitter at NashWalker9, at Locked On Twins for Twin stuff every day. I don't know if anyone tweets or talks about the Twins as much as I do, even in the middle of a lockout, which is awesome. And we have a great team at Twins Daily, pumping out great coverage, great content all the time. Locked On is outstanding as well with some great hosts. And I'm appreciative of you listening today. So thank you very much. We're looking at the failures. And whenever I think about this front office, and I want to make this very clear, this is a nuanced conversation. It doesn't have to be, this was a complete failure, this was a complete success. And that's a good example of that is the Nelson Cruz signing. This front office brought in Nelson Cruz. This front office traded Nelson Cruz. This front office didn't create Nelson Cruz. So it's two sides work together. Sometimes two sides work together. Sometimes two sides work apart. Sometimes one side works, the other doesn't. It's hard to break it down in a completely refined way. Now, the Nelson Cruz example is a good one because Nelson Cruz was already Nelson Cruz. He was already amazing. The front office brought him in. So how much credit do they get for Nelson Cruz and his success in Minnesota? You got to balance those things. We're balancing the failures too. So that's a big part of this. There's also adversity. There's adversity for every front office. And maybe how you judge a front office is how they deal with that adversity, how they deal with injuries, how they deal with ineffectiveness, how they deal with X, Y, Z. The Twins front office has dealt with adversity. There's no question since they came in. They had immediate adversity. We looked at the Twins' top 10 prospects when this front office came in before 2017. The cupboards were bare. There was not a lot there in terms of top prospects outside of Alex Kirilloff and Lewin Diaz. Those were the only two really on that prospect list. Their number one prospect, Nick Gordon, could be a contributor for the Twins in 2022 and beyond, but we're not counting on that from Gordon. So that's adversity right there. There was adversity in 2019, even though the team was very, very good in 2019. There was adversity in 2020. Of course, there was adversity in 2021. We're going to talk about all those things today. When I think of this front office, though, this is my main point. When we talk about failures, it's the first thing I wrote. It's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about their failures and I think about what could have gone better in the past. What could they have done better? And maybe it's not entirely fair because not a lot of starting pitchers were traded at the 19 deadline. But the 2019 trade deadline was this prime opportunity to go out and get a top 2 or 3 starter. They didn't know Michael Pineda was going to be suspended. So there's adversity. They didn't know that Pineda's suspension was looming, and they assumed it would be Barrios, Pineda, Odorizzi in the playoffs. Pineda gets suspended. All of a sudden, Randy Domnack starting game 2 at Yankee Stadium. To be fair, Domnack was pitching very well, but not with a track record to pitch at Yankee Stadium in game 2 of a playoff series, right? That was not an ideal scenario for the Twins, especially after losing game 1 to then go to Domnack in a day game in game 2 the next day. It wasn't an ideal scenario for them by any means. However, they could have done more at the 19 deadline. They could have perhaps traded for Marcus Stroman. Marcus Stroman moved to the Mets at the deadline. Mets not even sure if they were competing. Now, the Twins have said, there's been reports that the Twins were waiting for the Blue Jays to call back. They were waiting to make an offer, make their best offer for Marcus Stroman. They just never got that call back. So again, it's nuanced. We don't quite know. However, we look at the results. We look at what happened. We look at what happened in the playoffs. Twins could have used a number 2 or 3 starter. And who does that fall on ultimately? It doesn't fall on the Blue Jays, right? It doesn't fall on the Mets. That falls on the front office to be able to go out and secure a number 2 or 3 starter. And maybe even someone like Zach Greinke, getting creative for Zach Greinke at that point, right? Who had like a 2.75 ERA in Arizona. Eventually the Astros trade for him. Could have been the Twins. Maybe they're on his no trade list, right? So again, nuanced. It's nuanced. However, when you look at just the end of it, you look at the bottom line. When you work out an equation, you go assets minus liabilities equals stockholders' equity. When you look at the equity of Yankee Stadium in Game 2, that's your outcome. How do we get there? That's what we see. We see the outcome, right? And we need more than what we saw in that outcome, which was a more competitive rotation in the playoffs. Twins offense didn't show up. No doubt about it. Twins offense didn't show up in the 2020 postseason either against Houston at home. Kenta Maeda pitched well. Jose Barrios pitched well. The offense didn't show up in that series. Adversity in that series, Josh Donaldson's hurt. Byron Buxton has a concussion. Adversity in the 2019 playoffs, Byron Buxton's concussed. Does it go any differently without him? Or with him, I mean? We'll never know. We'll never know. And likely not. And we will never know about that. I promise there are a lot of other little tidbit failures we're going to get to here. And some bigger ones as well. We're going to get to them after this word from Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. This is the time of year that I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the best, the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors. Yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good. These are going to be your new favorite. Go to Built.com, scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15, that's LOCKED15, for 15% off at Built.com. It's Super Week brought to you by Get Upside, and there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. Getting back to the failures of this front office since they came in at the end of the 2019 season or in that offseason leading into 2017. Offseason aggression, this kind of ties into the 2019 deadline. And biased right now because they did nothing before the lockout. So that just furthers the offseason aggression point. When I mean offseason aggression, we have not seen them once completely sell out early for a free agent. We just haven't seen it. And maybe they did for Zach Wheeler. They made him an offer. It wasn't enough. When I say sell out, I mean secure Zach Wheeler, secure Yu Darvish, secure Blake Snell in a trade. It doesn't even have to be a free agent. Aggression in the offseason. I want them to be more aggressive. It's just, I bet every fan base says this about their front office, but the Twins do it at such a turtle pace. And that doesn't mean that I don't think that sometimes is a good strategy. I think the process of last year's strategy during the COVID shutdown in the offseason, actually played into their hand. I think it does at times. Didn't this year before the lockout. No question about it. I wanted them to change their process this year. I made that very clear on this podcast. Like, please get aggressive for a free agent. Maybe they don't want any of those free agents, but it's hard to believe they don't want any of the 5, starting pitchers who signed for $100 million or more. You don't want any of those guys? You got Bailey Ober and Joe Ryan. That's it, right? So would like to see them get more aggressive for sure. The obvious ones we heard about all year: Akil Baddoo's non-protection, Rule 5 pick. Lamont Wade Jr. traded. Luis Gil traded in the Jake Cave deal. Tyler Wells didn't protect him. Baltimore picks him up. He was good out of their bullpen, throwing 97. The 2020 offseason, I mentioned I thought played into their hands. So maybe the process was sound, but the results weren't sound. At the time, I thought the Andrelton Simmons signing made a ton of sense for them, and I thought it was a good one. I wanted Marcus Semien for them, but I was just fine with Andrelton Simmons. So I don't want to play this game where I look back and I'm like, well, I didn't really like this. I'll be honest with you. I like the Simmons signing. I called the Alexander Colome signing the best deal, the best bargain of the offseason. So I believe that the process was sound. The results were not. And so it's easy in hindsight to look back and be like, they should have been more aggressive. They should have been. It ties into my first offseason aggression point. This is a good example. Andrelton Simmons, who I ended up being okay with. And I've vowed to break down signings in a way where I'm not swayed, where I don't want to be talked into it. I want to break it down, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to continue to do that. I did that with Dylan Bundy. Was not super excited about that signing. I remain not super excited about that signing. I wasn't super excited about the Andrelton Simmons signing. I was positive. I wasn't excited. But here's a good example. Instead of Andrelton Simmons, take my first couple points of aggression. Go pay the extra for Marcus Semien. Marcus Semien just had a 40 home run season for Toronto. Would it have changed the Twins season? Probably not. But you could have traded Semien for legitimate prospects at the deadline instead of having to hold on to Andrelton Simmons. So that's like a prime example for me of why I want them to change their process. If you want Marcus Semien, go get Marcus Semien for $7 million more than you paid Andrelton Simmons instead of getting Simmons and then signing Colome. Go get Semien, right? Again, last year, I like those moves. I like the process of those moves. So I'm going to be better. I've learned through supporting and getting talked into certain moves, but I did like those moves. The 2021 collapse. This is just so complicated because it's not just what they did in the offseason. Buxton getting hurt, the COVID outbreak, ineffectiveness from guys who had been good prior to 2021. J-Happ came into 2021, and I'll be clear, J-Happ was the one I was least excited about last offseason. I didn't understand why they signed J-Happ because I talk all the time about a righty-heavy division, and to the extreme, the White Sox destroyed J-Happ last year. I always talk about not starting lefties against the White Sox unless it's Robbie Ray, unless it's Carlos Rodon. Hopefully it is on opening day in 2022. Don't start lefties against the Sox, soft tossing lefties. They did J-Happ. They skipped him in the rotation at a certain point because he couldn't start against the White Sox. He got beat so bad by the White Sox. Didn't like that. So there's part of it. Like they shouldn't have made those moves. Process versus results, man. It's just such a tricky game. The 2021 collapse at The Athletic, maybe this is a better way to say it. At The Athletic, they came out with this survey, and we've talked about it the last couple episodes. What do you credit the 2021 failure? What's your biggest credit to the failures in 2021? I said not enough talent acquisition in the offseason, which I said that last week. So I will stand by. They should have had Semien instead of Simmons. They should have gone higher on the free agent market for starting pitchers. They should have done this. They should have done that. There were also things that happened in the season when we talk about adversity that definitely didn't help their case either. But that's not letting them off the hook. They needed to do more in a position to win the Central last year to really bolster the team and move it forward. Let's talk more about Derek Falvey, Thad Levine's tenure after this word from BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the playoffs right to the big game this Sunday. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is where the game starts. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline, where the game starts. Looking back at some of the failures of this front office, how they're nuanced, how the successes are nuanced too from Monday. The lack of the movement before the lockout, that kind of ties in with offseason aggressiveness. The Miguel Sano extension at this point doesn't look great. However, it was a low-risk kind of extension, but he makes it trickier this offseason because do you stick with him at first base? Do you put Alex Kirilloff there? Do you trade Miguel Sano? Do you have to eat money in a trade? Doesn't look great. The Polanco-Kepler extensions, especially the Polanco extension, look good. Kepler's looks decent. Sano's not so great. Jose Barrios. Failing to extend Jose Barrios. What do you think? Guess the jury's out on that. But the Twins could use him in their rotation right now. If I were to ask you today, would you rather have Jose Barrios for the next 7 years at $130 million? I think is what he signed for with the Blue Jays. Or would you rather have Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson with 6 years of team control, 3 at the league minimum, 3 at arbitration salaries, but we don't know if they'll ever make it to the majors. However, Martin's a top prospect. Simeon Woods Richardson, top 100, former top 100. What would you prefer? I think right now, sitting here right now, I would put Jose Barrios' contract on the books. So I call that a failure because I would take that contract over Martin and Woods Richardson right now. That could change. If the Twins go out, well, it could have changed before the lockout. This was my point. It could have changed before the lockout because if the Twins went out and they signed Robbie Ray for $5 and $115 or Kevin Gausman for $5 and $115, they had signed in that range. And then they also had Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson, and they had that pitcher they signed for less money than Barrios signed for. Yes, that's a win. I would rather have the former than Barrios in that case. But they didn't do that. And Carlos Rodon doesn't really fit that bill. He doesn't really fit that bill. They could flip this by taking a different group of prospects, trading them for a Chris Bassett or a Frankie Montas, and then extending said pitcher on a lesser deal or on a similar deal. And Martin ends up being better than the player you sent out for the pitcher they traded for, if that makes sense. So it's the jury's out. But today, I would take Barrios and his contract over Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson. So I'll put that in this group. This offseason, the jury still is out. The lockout's not over. There's still players out there. There's still trades to be made. So we're not going to judge this offseason until it's over. Have I been discouraged? Am I upset about what happened before the lockout? Absolutely. I think it's really disappointing so far. The pitchers added, Woods Richardson. Other pitchers they've added to this system via draft, Matt Cantorino, Cole Sands. A lot of guys. They brought in, Joe Ryan, Bailey Ober. They have guys, the pitchers added, jury's out. We talked about that on Monday. A big part of how this front office is evaluated will come in 2022. I said that about 2021, and yeah, our tick went down for sure. And now you're like, you got to show out. Show out or shut up at that point about this farm system. So it's a big summer for that. Jose Miranda, Spencer Steer development. We'll see just the development of the hitting prospects. Royce Lewis, the Royce Lewis pick, their number 1 pick in 2017, could end up being a booming success, could end up being one of their brightest failures on their resume, drafting Royce Lewis ahead of Hunter Green, who's a top 15 to 20 prospect in baseball, throwing 100 for the Reds. Twins could use him. Could end up being a failure. Austin Martin, Yohan Duran, again, could end up being failures, could end up being booming successes. So we talk about jury being out on that. There's a ton to gauge in 2022. And that's when we look at this equation, they've had their successes, they've had their failures. I think what it comes out to, and I didn't mean to just scrub over the Baddoo, Wade, Eel, Tyler Wild stuff. That sucks. In some ways, the jury's still out on them too. We got to see. We see guys have great rookie seasons and then end up not producing the next year, and they don't end up really having prolonged major league careers. So we have to see. Now they lost talent. That sucks. I think Lamont Wade Jr. is going to be a good player. I think Akil Baddoo is going to be a good player. I think Tyler Wells and Luis Gil are going to be good players as well. So that sucks. And those could enhance into bigger failures as well. So I didn't mean to just brush over that. I think the extent of that failure has yet to be seen. It could be a mini 1-year failure. It could be a prolonged career failure, or it could be something in the middle of those two things. But a ton to gauge. We look at that equation. What I come out to is about a 2 or a 3 out of 5. It's like right in the middle. 0 was, I think they're terrible. They've done a terrible job. 5 means I think that they are the most amazing front office I've seen. They're 2 or 3, probably a 2.5. They're probably right in the middle of 0 to 5 at this point. I keep using that scale because of the athletic survey, but I'd probably put them at a 2.5. And we're going to find out a lot. They have the downside to get to a 0. Honestly, and they have the upside to get to a 5, I think, with the arms in the system and with with hopefully development from those prospects and hopefully some moves after the lockout. Friday, we're going to talk about the leash for Derek Falvey and Thad Levine because this will be year 6. This is year 6. A lot of front offices don't last that long. I'm going to reference a piece from Britt Gioli. I think that's how you say her name at The Athletic. She's amazing. writer at The Athletic. So I'll reference a piece she wrote about GMs and how long they last. And then we'll use that to kind of evaluate Derek Falvey and Thad Levine. And then we'll also link in Polad's comments, other things as well. But we have Rocco Baldelli next week, his evaluation, and then we're going to do an ownership evaluation shortly after, hopefully as the new CBA is inked. Thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day, and I'll make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets is hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again for listening. Have a great day. Go Twins.